that we have to do to create a culturally healthy and skilled leaders is to move those leaders to cultural health and skill so that they then are qualified or equipped to create the cultural environment in which all of the other people can thrive together, okay? So you can see that. So the first order of business is always, in any organization, the first thing that we need to do in any organization is to develop culturally healthy and skilled leaders, because only culturally healthy and skilled leaders are qualified or equipped to create the cultural environment, which is the purpose of leadership, right? The purpose of a leader is to create the environment in which other people can thrive, okay? As it relates to cultural leadership, it's to create the cultural environment in which people of diverse cultures and multiple backgrounds can thrive together, okay? So one of the things that we have done through the Cultural Mastery Division here at Bilingual America is to begin to measure the cultural health and skill of leaders. And some of you, before this webinar, you took an assessment, which by my own admission, and we understand if you took it, is very personal. And I want you to know that if you did take it, whatever you put there is strictly private. Nobody else will ever see that data. But I chose not to share that particular data here in this webinar, really more out of respect to privacy to the group and maybe not, because sometimes the scores aren't very high, okay? But what I do want to do is show you a sample report. This is real data that I'm going to show you. This is real data of 30 leaders, okay? And these are 30 business leaders, diversity and inclusion leaders, and academic leaders. So academic leaders would be superintendents, principals, vice principals. Business leaders would be leaders in large corporations, and diversity and inclusion leaders would be people who are at high levels in that position within large corporations. So 30, and this is real data that I'm going to share with you here in just a moment, okay? So we create this cultural transformation, and we do this in our world through our cultural mastery training, okay? And cultural mastery comes out of a book that I wrote called The 6 Stages of Cultural Mastery, and we use the principles of that, and that is to create a mindset and a skill set, okay? And that mindset, it determines how we view one another, okay? And that addresses things like bias and stereotypes and all of those good things, right? And let me come back here. And skill set determines how we treat one another. Every one of us would agree that, especially in a macro culture, as far as our country is concerned, we have some very, very concerning things going on as to the way we view one another, our stereotypes, our biases, our positions, the way we frame our conversations, and as far as a skill set, and the way we're treating one another. And so both mindset and skill set have to be transformed in order to transform our cultural relationships, okay? And again, we do this through cultural mastery training. So this comes out of the 6 stages of cultural mastery, which basically stage 1 is education. What do we know about each other? Most of the time, we don't know very much. And a lot of times, what we do know isn't even accurate. Stage 2 is engagement. How do we meaningfully engage with one another? And stage 3 is empathy, which I love, because most people think empathy is like putting myself in your shoes, which it's not. Empathy comes from a Greek term, empathos, which means in passion. Empathy means I have become passionate about you, and you about me. And this is a tipping point as it relates to bias, because a lot of people say, well, you have unconscious bias, and so we go into conscious bias training and things like that, or you have implicit or complicit and all this stuff, right? But the reality is that the only way to deal with bias, because you can't eliminate it, the only way to deal with bias is to move it from being negative bias to positive bias. And when we truly become empathetic towards people of another culture through proper education and through meaningful engagement, the negative bias goes away. It's like magic, right? And so I love stage 3 empathy. Then stage 4 is excitement, and that's where we become excited about the relationship together, and we actually start setting vision together. And stage 5 is empowerment. How do we bring that vision to life? And stage 6 is endearment, okay? And endearment is very important because we have this kind of mantra in our world today, which is cultural tolerance. And it's one of the most, maybe it was necessary years ago. It's like, we just need to kind of tolerate each other. But the antithesis to hate is love. Okay? The antithesis to hate is love, not tolerance. We have to move now beyond this idea of cultural tolerance to the idea of cultural endearment. So the goal of our cultural relationships must be cultural endearment. We must learn to love one another. Now, we don't just fall in love. Okay? That's a bit of a myth. We grow into love. And that's a very important thing because there's process that's involved. So cultural endearment doesn't just happen because we say, oh, I love people, or I love other people. No, that's not true. We grow into love. So we go through this process of education, engagement, empathy, excitement, empowerment, and then endearment. The greatest of these is love, right? So people who are culturally endeared with one another, they'll sacrifice ego because love doesn't just seek its own good, right? Love will sacrifice. And they'll sacrifice for the common good. And all high-level collaboration on our teams and our organizations, if we really want to transform the way people collaborate with one another, we must get them to cultural endearment. Because collaboration depends on it. Because it's only at that point, when we're endeared together, where we will drop our egos and we'll sacrifice together for the common good. So I kind of look at cultural mastery like this. Cultural diversity, it gets everyone to the game. Cultural inclusion requires that everyone play in the game. But cultural mastery ensures that everyone wins in the game together. So I kind of look at it kind of almost like D&I 2.0, right? Diversity and inclusion is critical in our world. But it's possible to bring in diversity and inclusion into our organizations, and if we don't manage and leverage those relationships properly, if we don't get to cultural endearment together, then we create a whole other set of challenges for our organizations. So this is why we have to develop these cultural relationships first, because they will dictate our cultural realities. So again, as we kind of continue on this path here to creating cultural transformation, that after we develop the leaders of an organization or community into cultural masters, and we fundamentally, right, I mean at the deepest levels, transform their mindset and their skill set regarding cultural relationships, we then bring them together as a group to work through the 6 stages of cultural transformation, okay? And the 6 stages of cultural transformation is the necessary addition to the 6 stages of cultural mastery. Here's the difference. The 6 stages of cultural mastery are designed for the individual. It's the personal development of the leader, the formation of a healthy and skilled cultural mindset and cultural skill set. The 6 stages of cultural transformation takes people who are now culturally healed, are healthy, or skilled, right? And it brings those people together to go through these 6 stages of cultural transformation, which brings a total and deep and meaningful and sustainable cultural transformation to an entity or an organization or even a community. We're working right now with a little county in Indiana that had the highest incidence of HIV/AIDS in the country. Even got in the Yale Review, Washington Post, just north of Louisville, Kentucky. And they've tried all kinds of seminars and so, beginning to work with them with cultural transformation, to begin to start to put together leadership groups who become culturally healthy and skilled, so we can deeply, deeply transform that little county in Indiana north of Louisville, right? And so these are community transformation plans. But the same thing happens in an organization. And I'll share one of those case studies with you in just a little bit here. So the role of this culturally healthy and skilled leadership group, which, by the way, in a large organization should probably be 24 people, 18 to 24 people. In a smaller organization, perhaps even 6 to 12, depending on the size of the organization. But the role that they have together as they go through the 6 stages of cultural transformation is to create the environment in which all people of all cultures can thrive together. Again, going back to the very beginning, culturally unhealthy or unskilled leaders simply are not equipped. They may have the best of intentions, but they are not equipped to create a culturally healthy and skilled environment. And so if we want to really, truly create cultural transformation in our organizations, then we have to set the infrastructure correctly for this. So these people, these leaders who have been developed, they become the catalyst to ensure meaningful, and I would add sustainable cultural transformation throughout the organization, okay? So what are the 6 stages of cultural transformation? The first one is angst. You notice with the 6 stages of cultural mastery that they all began with the letter E, and these will all begin with the letter A. I do love alliteration, okay? And so angst. Every significant change movement, if you study them, begin with either pain or discomfort. People don't change when they're comfortable. They don't change when everything is going well. They change when there's pain. And we're in a lot of cultural pain right now. Every week, if you want, you can read about people who derail their careers or severely damage the organizational brand that they work for or represent because they say or do something that is just unacceptable culturally. And they're not even aware of what they're doing sometimes. And so we're living in a world right now where there's a lot of cultural pain. And there's a lot of movement to hold people accountable for things. And I just read a report this morning that 50% of ministers in the United States, in a major study that was done, 50% of ministers in the United States are very concerned about offending someone culturally just by saying the wrong thing in the wrong way. And I think a lot of us are right now kind of like, especially working and talking and speaking with people from other cultures, a little bit like apprehensive. What do we say? How do we say it? Okay? And that's the necessity of the cultural mindset and skill set development with cultural mastery, right? But pain drives cultural transformation. You look at Mothers Against Drunk Driving, right? Well, this young teenage girl walking down the road to go to church was killed by a drunk driver, and her mother was in such pain that she started MAD, right? I believe that happened, I think it was in Oklahoma, or it was a Midwestern state out there. Pain, angst.